Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, they humiliated us like animals and beat us like slaves. Cameroon's accused of forcibly repatriating around 100,000 Nigerian refugees. Human Rights Watch claims that some were tortured before being loaded onto trucks and illegally sent back. Also, Ugandan opposition MPs fight tooth and nail against efforts to change the constitution. This time, literally. For the second day running, brawling erupts in parliament. Nevertheless, a motion's passed to advance a bid to remove age limits to the presidency. And anti-corruption marches across South Africa have President Jacob Zuma in their sights. The rallies are organised by the country's biggest union ahead of the December leadership vote for the ANC. Demonstrators believe the president and his circle of influence are synonymous with graft. But first, Yaoundé's been accused of breaking international law by forcibly deporting around 100,000 Nigerian refugees. Human Rights Watch says that most were in the country after having fled the Boko Haram insurgency and that some were tortured by the army before being sent back. Investigators claim that some were so malnourished that they didn't survive the return. Nicolas Chemin tells us more.
Human Rights Watch says it's one of the world's largest recent cases of illegal mass forced return of refugees. In a new report, the NGO says Cameroon has sent 100,000 Nigerians back to their country since 2015. Refugees who'd fled Boko Haram's violence.
The Cameroonian military intercepts them in the border areas, tortures some of them as Boko Haram suspects, beats and abuses others, sexually exploits women, some of whom are accused of being Boko Haram wives.
The Cameroonian government said the report was baseless.
I adamantly reject such an accusation, which I consider to be libelous, to be slanderous, the purpose of which being to discredit, to dishonor our country.
Human Rights Watch said Nigeria was complicit in the forceful returns because it had sent military vehicles to help bring back its citizens from Cameroon. The Nigerian government said it was acting legally.
We have the security agencies involved, and a meeting has been going on plan on how, if there's the need to repatriate them, they will be repatriated according to the law.
Earlier this year, the UN Refugee Agency had also said it was concerned by cases of forced returns from Cameroon to Nigeria. It stressed that the conditions in northeast Nigeria do not yet exist to make returns safe and sustainable.
Fighting broke out for the second day running in Ugandan parliament as opposition MPs were forcibly evicted from the chamber amidst tensions over attempts to remove an upper age limit to the presidency. Despite legislators having to be dragged out, a motion was passed to allow a draft bill aiming to remove obstacles from President Yoweri Museveni running in the 2021 elections. For now, the 73-year-old's barred from doing so because of the 75-year-old cut-off. Museveni's been in power since 1986, and the political manoeuvring has sparked weeks of demonstrations. Michael O'Hagan brings us more from Kampala.
President Museveni has dominated politics in Uganda since he took control of the country at the head of a rebel army in 1986. And while there is some degree of day-to-day freedom in Uganda, issues of state control are not up for discussion. Dissent is not tolerated. Last week, just before this motion was first due to be introduced, an NGO and a think tank which had cautioned against the move were raided in a very heavy-handed fashion by police. This initial move only required a 50% majority in Parliament, a Parliament which has been dominated by President Museveni's national resistance movement since disputed elections last year. So there was little doubt that this move would be successful.
So where do things go from here?
Well, this is the very first stage in a parliamentary process. In the following stages, Parliament will need to pass legislation by 2/3 majority. But there's already been allegations that money has changed hands to make sure that those MPs who are not already on board will back this move. One person to watch is a singer turned recently elected MP who is young and very, very popular with the people here. If he were to come out and strongly resist this move, then there may be protests in the street, more than we've seen in recent days that the police have clamped down on with tear gas and rubber bullets. This MP is called Bobby Wine, and if he moves strongly against this bill, then there could be resistance.
Now, technically, Museveni hasn't said that he's planning on running in 2021, and technically the change is to stop age discrimination for anyone who wanted to have a shot at the presidency. Is anyone buying into this?
I think no one's buying into that. President Museveni has successfully removed any hurdle over the years to achieving a life presidency, most notably in 2005 when he removed term limits. I think everyone has agreed that he is determined to stay in the presidency for life.
Michael Hagan there for us. Now, anti-corruption protests were held across South Africa on Wednesday. The rallies were organised by COSATU, the country's biggest trade union, and were targeted at President Jacob Zuma and his camp, ahead of the December vote for a new leader for the ruling ANC party. Zuma's time in office has been plagued by scandal, accusations of influence peddling and abuse of power. COSATU is opposed to the candidate Zuma faction's backing in the race to lead the ANC. Our Aisha Ishmael was at the Cape Town March on Wednesday. She tells us more.
South Africa has seen a number of protests against President Jacob Zuma, corruption in government and corruption in the private sector. But this one is particularly significant because it's being called by members of the tripartite alliance, namely the South African Communist Party and the Congress of South African Trade Unions.
Zuma must go! Zuma must go! Zuma must go!
The government must end corruption. The government must end state capture. And the state president, with the powers invested in him, he must call for a judicial commission of inquiry on state capture and corruption. Because he has been delaying, workers are saying the president of South Africa must step down because he has failed to deliver ethical leadership to the masses of South Africa.
COSATU has called on its members to stay away from work and to take to the streets to make their voices heard against corruption. Now, this is a national strike. People have stayed away from work in droves, and they're saying that they will no longer tolerate corruption in government or in the private sector.
Well, Operation Alligator Bites left its mark on the Nigerian health sector. Almost all public hospitals have been hit by an indefinite strike. Health workers have staged the walkout after issuing a 7-day ultimatum to the government. They're demanding to be paid outstanding wages and better training and professional opportunities. Our correspondent sent us this report from Lagos.
This housewife shops regularly at the local market close to her home. Kemi's been a nurse since the late 80s, but for the last 7 years, her career's been at a standstill, and so's her salary. It's put a strain on her household budget. That's why she supports the strike in 90% of Nigeria's public hospitals.
Before, we used to buy a bag of rice, keep at home, buy yam, keep at home. But now we come to market almost every day. This mama here used to see me every day here. I buy 2 cups. The day I have 3, the day I have small money, I buy 3 cups, which is very much unlike nurses before. We stock our house so that we can concentrate on our patients and care for them.
At Lagos University Hospital, members of the trade union have been invited to meet the head of the nursing unit.
We will not take kindly to people threatening our members. So they should not threaten them in any way.
Accompanied by national representatives, these trade union delegates tour the wards to check the right to strike's been respected. Only a skeleton staff looking after patients in critical condition are allowed to be on duty. After an hour, the head of the hospital sends in security guards and police officers.
What we are talking about, sir, is entering into wards, and affect people that are having the legitimate right to work. Who is that?
Despite the occasional tense standoff, union reps were pleased with the 100% success rate of the Lagos strike action, but say the pressure isn't off yet. They plan to keep pushing the Ministry of Health until their demands are heard.
Well, that's it for Eye on Africa for now. Thanks very much for joining us. Do so again. Take care.